Hello everyone. So in 12.8 we take the graphs of the trig functions that we've been looking at for a little bit and shifting them. So we've already made them taller or shorter. We're also going to shift them to the left and to the right based off of our h and our k, and also a now has the potential to flip our graph upside down. So general form for sine and cosine. Remember to find the period, you take 2 pi over b. For tangent, you would take pi over b, since pi is your normal period length. So, for sine and cosine, I would recommend graphing your vertical and horizontal shift, essentially drawing your new x and y axis that you're going to reference. Then plot your beginning, your end, and then your middle, and then plot your halfway points before you can sketch your curve. So like for this one, I'm going to state my amplitude, which is 2. I don't have anything in front of my parentheses, so my period is the normal 2 pi. For my horizontal shift, it says plus pi over 2, so that means we're going to go left pi over 2. And then my vertical shift, I don't have anything, so none. So my midline, the thing that's right through the center of my graph, is still my x-axis. But since I've shifted left pi over 2, I like to plot that as like my new y-axis. And then to think about where your end is, think about where it would have been. So it would have been at 2 pi, but we've shifted left pi over 2. I also like to kind of sort of put a line there, not so much that the graph actually ends there, because if we graphed more than one period, we would go further. However, that's just a good reference point of, alright, well, this is my whole thing. From this left line to this right line, I'm going to see one sine curve. And then for my plotting of points, so I've got my starting point. Remember, sine starts at 0. It also ends at 0. And then my halfway point, which would have been at pi, now is at pi over 2, since I've shifted left pi over 2. I've got my beginning, I've got my end. So next up is going to be graphing those sort of halfway points between the beginning and the middle, and the halfway point between the middle and the end. So halfway in between these two guys is at 0. I have an amplitude of 2, so I've got to go up to 2 as sine starts going up, so long as you're not flipped, and then it's going to go down. So halfway between pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2 is pi. So I go down to there and connect my points. Once you've got your guides of your beginning, end, and middle, the rest should follow a little bit easier, but if you do find it easier to graph your unshifted graph, so just graphing 2 sine of theta, and then shift it left pi over 2, feel free. Just make sure I can tell which one your final answer is. So let's look at a cosine graph. So I have an amplitude of 1/2, so it is shorter. I have a period that is of normal length, since I don't even have parentheses, I don't have anything in front of there. My horizontal shift is none, since there's nothing grouped with the theta. And then my vertical shift looks like I'm going up 3. So, didn't go anywhere left or right, but I did go up 3. So that's kind of my new x-axis. My y-axis for my beginning point is still the same. My period is still 2 pi, so I have sort of an end point. Let me move that. endpoint still at 2 pi. Just so I sort of have a scope of, alright, where's my graph going to be in between? Now remember, cosine starts at 1 normally, dips down, and comes back up to 1. So since I've moved up 3, and my amplitude's 1/2, I'm going to start at 3.5. Cosine also ends at that high point, so at 2 pi I also am at 3.5. And then halfway in between those points is a minimum that is going to be at pi and down 1/2. My halfway points are zeros. And now I can just connect. So I have a vertically shorter graph. Horizontal length is the same. I've just moved up 3. The equation for the midline to correspond with this would just be y equals 3. Shifting tangent. So remember, amplitude really isn't a thing with tangent. The A value, if anything, just tells us kind of how bumpy it is in the middle. So it doesn't really apply for tangent. We have a period that is of normal length since there is nothing in front of my parentheses, so it is pi. I have a horizontal shift of left pi over 4. And then I have a vertical shift of down 2. So that midline sort of thing is going to be y equals -2. So plot my vertical and horizontal shift. I've shifted left pi over 4. So that's my new y-axis. I've shifted down 2. So this is like my new origin. Remember, tangent did have a point at the origin when I had my y value over my x value at 0 or at 2 pi. It was at that origin. It was 0 over 1, which is 0. So I do have a point at my new origin at that intersection of the vertical and horizontal shift. I then want to take half my period length to the left and to the right for my asymptotes. So I have a period of pi, which means I'm going to go pi over 2. Each of these are pi over 4, so pi over 4, pi over 2. That's my actual asymptote. So if the line in the middle kind of is throwing you off, you can just erase it, just so we have a cleaner graph of what we're actually looking at. I have an amplitude of 1, which just means that, alright, so halfway in between my center and my graph, I just go up 1 and down 1. But so long as you have a curve that follows this general flow, you're okay. And lastly, putting some of these things together. So we've done a vertical shift, we've done a horizontal shift, we've shifted tangent. Let's put it all together. So I've got an amplitude of 3 from my number in front of the function. My period is going to be 2 pi over b, which is 2. So my period is pi, so I am horizontally shorter. I've shifted right pi over 2. And up 4. So, graph sort of my lines for my shift. And ask yourself, does sine start at 0 or does sine normally start at 1? Sine normally starts at 0 since on our unit circle, at 0, my y value there was 0. So my beginning and my end is going to be at 0. So I'm starting at pi over 2. My period length is pi, so I'm going to end at 3 pi over 2. So within this window, I should see my whole graph. End at that 4, which is my new sort of 0. Halfway in between, I also have a 0. Graph our points halfway in between our beginning and middle. I don't have a negative in front, so I go up my amplitude, so 1, 2, 3. Down my amplitude between the other two, 1, 2, 3. Connect my curve. So I am taller than a normal sine function. I have a shorter period. I've shifted right pi over 2, and I've gone up 4. That's about it. We'll practice more of this together in class, and I'll see you then.